I never would have guessed the horrible catastrophe my sister's wedding descended into, and I never would have pictured me being here now, penning a piece on it all, yet here we are. To be honest, I wish I could say I regret attending that wedding, but given the start of everything falling apart, it is difficult to feel that way. Let me take you back. The oldest of 3 children, I go by Rachel. The middle child is my sister Kristen. Then there is our younger brother Noah, who is still in his teens. Thus, he essentially watches from the sidelines in all of this. Always the golden child in the family, Kristen seemed to have it together and was the one everyone loved. She was always perfect, the sort of person incapable of doing wrong. It therefore felt like a fairy tale when she met Jacob and declared she was getting married. Although I knew Jacob not very well at the time, he seemed kind enough. He seemed to be absolutely head over heels for her and was friendly and gentle, but at least not the way I would have wanted it to be. This was not a wedding about love, and it most definitely was not a family-oriented wedding. It all began some months before the event. Kristen had always found our mother problematic. It wasn't that Mom didn't fit into that picture. It was more that Kristen had an idea of what our family should look like, and Mom didn't fit into that picture. To clarify, let me say Liza, our mother, remarried when I was 16, thus her 40 when she married Felix. He was precisely 6 years younger than her. Though it was not important to me, it was to Kristen. For some reason, Kristen has always been uneasy about our mom hanging around with a younger man. I recall her clearly becoming agitated at learning about Felix and Mom's relationship. Kristen would say, "It's just so weird. Mom should have been with someone closer to her age." She had visions of Mom being with a steady older man, maybe someone more respectful. Felix was really good. I enjoy him. He treated Mom as though she were the most vital person in his life and was friendly and entertaining. But Kristen saw nothing past the age difference. Years of complaining about it, she would say it was wrong, and Felix wasn't the ideal match for Mom. It produced this strange relationship at family get-togethers. When Felix showed up, Kristen would behave like Felix did not exist. If Mom mentioned him too much, Kristen would become stiff and uncomfortable. Mom's happiness seemed to challenge the narrative Kristen had created for herself, the perfect family she was committed to preserving. When Kristen asked us all to a family meal not long before her wedding, things became tight. She said vaguely that Felix would not be attending the wedding. She probably felt it was not really significant. That was, however, the last straw for me. For years at that point, Felix had been such a significant part of our life. Kristen was simply deleting him. It still astounded me. She looked down, not meeting my gaze when I sent her a glance across the desk. I hardly wanted to talk to her that evening. I experienced this biting sense of treachery. There was then the wedding itself. When the day arrived, everything seemed strange from the time I arrived at the place. Forceful grins and stilted politeness permeated the air. I felt uncomfortable about something in the way Kristen's in-laws were staring at us. Though there was a tension there, a clear uneasiness that made me want to leave there fast, it was not pure animosity. I had to be there for Kristen, so I couldn't, though. She was my sister, and even with all that had transpired, I wanted her to be happy. Well, my parents, that is, my dad and mom, had their own convoluted past. Michael, your dad, he was not someone you would want to invite to any party then. He had been emotionally abusive in ways I cannot even begin to explain, and mistreated my mother most of my life. Mom at last had the bravery to leave him when I was 17. He has always been self-serving, and I knew deep down that the harm he had done to our family would never be repaired. I did not feel really sympathetic to him, but Christine had always been unique. She felt a great urge to believe our parents could somehow work things out. She didn't view him the way I did, but I'm not sure if she was merely trying to grasp onto a vision of the family we used to be, or if she was simply too young to remember what had truly happened. She wanted our family back, the way things felt normal when we were little, but that was not realistic, not accompanied him. My dad's actions at the wedding just served to reinforce what I already knew. Of course, he arrived late and exhibited drunken behavior. He clearly had more than a few beers before even showing up. If you could even call it that. His speech was slurred, a jumble of incomprehensible syllables that made everyone around uneasy. Not even could I look at him. Though it was difficult, I made every effort to avoid him. The visitors were looking, some murmurs audible behind their hands. I thought of myself as suffocating. This was a slow-motion disaster, not a wedding. Then there was Kristen, poised there in her white dress, brilliant, but with that far-off gaze in her eyes. She seemed to be fighting to keep everything together, but I could see her front cracking. Deep down, I believe she understood it was not only our dad driving all the conflict, it was also hers. She was the one separating Mom from Felix, pretending as though everything was good when it wasn't. She was the one acting as though Mom could simply sweep the past under the rug for cosmetic sake. Kristen disagreed, though, not seeing it that way. And that is where everything began to spiral. The actual fallout started when the guests left the ceremony. Though I tried to seem as though everything was good, I couldn't get rid of the sense that something was off. I sensed the conflict between Mom and Kristen that day like never before. I also realized things were about to get bad when Kristen invited me to meet with her in-laws a few weeks later. You see, Kristen had started lying, a major one, telling them Mom hadn't gone to the wedding as she was too busy or disinterested. Though I could not will myself to face her about it, I knew the truth. Not yet. Not until I understood her range of willingness to maintain this deception. I couldn't simply sit there and watch her paint Mom in a negative light, though, either. And that is where things began to go apart for every one of us. I had no idea what I was heading into when Kristen first asked me to have lunch with her and her in-laws following her honeymoon return. Her tone when she texted me to confirm the specifics suggested something was off. Overly informal, nearly as though she was trying to persuade herself that nothing was wrong. I recognized the genuine nature of this lunch. It was not about catching up or reaching harmony. No. Kristen wanted me to confirm the chronology of events she had been relating to her in-laws. Her version was straightforward and a falsehood. Mom didn't care enough, so Kristen had begun telling everyone she was uninterested in being a part of Kristen's big day. She also told everyone Mom missed the wedding. Mom had several opportunities to show up, according to her. However, she decided not to. She neither even bothered to make the effort nor answered her invites or phone calls. I first assumed Kristen was merely venting. Then I became aware of how much she was slanting the story. The actual truth? The fact that Kristen had requested Mom not to invite Felix to the wedding had wounded, devastated even, her. Mom had put her own emotions aside for Kristen for years, putting up with her unease over the thought of Felix and Mom being together. She kept their marriage quiet as she could, not wanting to complicate things for Kristen. Not one large party or major announcement. That was it. A little court ceremony attended by Mom and Felix. Not even did they upload images online. The turning point, though, came when Kristen told Mom Felix wasn't wanted at the wedding. Mom had been steady for years. Over and over she would have told Kristen, "I'll respect your wishes." Still, this time it went beyond simply honoring Kristen's emotions. It was about regard for herself. Being informed that the person she loved, the person she had established a life with, was somehow inadequate to be included in Kristen's celebration infuriated her. And it was at that point, everything collapsed. Mom was absent from the wedding since Kristen had pushed her too far. And if anyone else ought to have been offended by it, Mom, not Kristen. But for whatever reason, Kristen found it difficult to view it that way. She refused to believe Mom missed for a legitimate cause. Rather, she turned her tail even more inward. The worst thing about it is she began begging me to support her in maintaining that falsehood. I first found myself not sure what to say. I was trying to guard Kristen. In all respects, she was my sister. She had a vision for her life, one that excluded Felix or any of the convoluted background he carried. That did not imply, however, that I had to assist her in rewriting the truth. I was unable to do it, not without betraying Mom. I could not live with that either. I found myself in a conundrum when Kristen requested I meet with her and her in-laws. I could disclose the truth and risk severing the delicate link we had left, or I could follow her narrative and help to maintain harmony. Deep down, I knew lying would just make things worse. It would simply widen the gulf between Mom and me, and it would make Kristen's in-laws believe she was the victim, while in fact, she was the one wreaking all the damage. The lunch itself matched my expectations in awkwardness. Kristensen was already seated at a table with her husband Jacob and his parents when I entered the restaurant. As though nothing were unusual, they were all laughing and conversing. I found the weight of the circumstances hovering over us right away as I settled in. Though everyone sensed something was awry, there was an underlying conflict whereby none wanted to confront it head-on. Jacob's folks were sincerely interested in finding out why Mom had missed the wedding. They knew she was a caring, encouraging mother from past encounters. Why she would have missed such a significant day for Kristen eluded them. Thus, it seemed as though Kristen was laying the groundwork for something when she first started talking. I couldn't just sit there and let Mom lie. She talked in that careful tone she used when she wanted to control the narrative and casually mentioned Mom had selected not to come. I had to speak out. "Kristen, I don't think that really is what happened," I whispered softly. Her eyes flicked to me and I sensed the strain building. Her grin got tighter. "What do you mean?" Her voice betrayed a trace of defensiveness as she asked. In my chest I could sense heat. Though my heart was racing, I was unconcerned. "I have to act on this. Mom skipped as you urged her not to invite Felix. Though throughout the years she has been quite tolerant with you, that was the breaking point." The chamber grew quiet. Parents of Jacob looked at one another. The face of Kristen became white. She started speaking, but the words appeared to fall short. I wasn't having it when she tried to recover and steer the discussion towards something else. This was the climax. "I'm sorry, but that's the reality." I wasn't going to let her spin the tale longer. My voice was steady despite the turmoil I was feeling inside. Mom was quite entitled to feel offended. You dragged her too far, Kristen, and you know it. Kristen didn't reply straight away. I suppose she was too stunned. Still, I could sense the wrath boiling under the surface. She wasn't sure how to mend something like I had damaged inside her. Jacob's parents looked at one another uneasily, apparently realizing they had been misled, then turned their focus back to me. "Rachel, is that... Actually, how did it turn out?" Mrs. with a wary yet sympathetic tone, Jacobs questioned. One nodded. "Sure. Though complex, that is the reality." Though it was difficult to hear, Kristen rose up suddenly, her chair rubbing against the floor, and she excused herself to head to the bathroom. As she went, I could sense her eyes blazing into the rear of my skull, and knew things were about to get even more strained. Though Jacob's parents tried to calm things down, I didn't want to act as though everything was good. I wanted them to know why Mom hadn't been there and why the whole thing had collapsed. Though I wasn't trying to make Kristen appear terrible, I wasn't going to let her turn Mom into the villain either. Kristen said not much when she returned. She behaved far out. Chill. Lunch was a blur, a sequence of strained dialogues and embarrassing silences. Though I knew she was enraged with me, I didn't give a damn. I had done what was required of me. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was being real to myself, even though it meant confronting my sister. Kristen hardly talked to me when lunch finished. She bid her in-laws goodbye, gave Jacob a cheek kiss, and hurried out of the restaurant without turning around. For a time, I stood there feeling the weight of the circumstances drop in. Though I had no idea what the next several weeks would look like, one thing was clear. Things had changed. I couldn't return to acting as though everything was under control. Neither could Kristen. Things between Kristen and I felt after lunch felt distinctive. I was unsure whether I ought to have expected that. Though there had always been a connection, a feeling of being on the same team, it is not like we were best friends previously. That day, the aftermath was intolerable, and that link seemed broken. For days, Kristen neglected to get in touch. Though I wanted to follow up to see whether she was okay, I had no idea what to say. I was not sorry for what I said over lunch. Actually, at last putting the truth out there made me strangely glad. But Kristen's, she was not prepared to hear it. Mom had too much to handle from the reality of what I had said, the reality of how far she had driven. She had been clinging to a perfect picture of our family for years, and now that illusion had been dashed. Watching it was the toughest thing I have done. Family is, I have always thought, about understanding, forgiving, and support. Sometimes, though, truth is muddy, and nobody ever truly tells you how difficult it might be to face. I considered the fallout from the lunch for some time. If I had done the right thing, I kept wondering. Though God knows Mom needed someone to be at her side, I hated the consequences it had created. I did not regret standing up for Mom, though I never expected we would reach a stage when she would avoid me like I was the enemy. Kristen and I had always had problems. And then the phone call arrived. One evening late, roughly 1 week following the lunch, my phone buzzed with a text alert from Kristen asking whether we could talk. I almost didn't reply. Then I considered Mom, how she had always begged me to be patient with her, even when she wasn't being fair, and to try and understand things from Christensen's point of view. So I answered quickly, "Sure, when?" I took a big breath. Kristen called me shortly after Rachel started, her voice flat like she was trying to control it. "We need to talk about what happened." "Okay. About what would you like to discuss?" There was a long silence. Kristen sighed heavily as though she was searching for the correct words. "I have been contemplating everything. I have been attempting to sort through all of it. Still, I'm not sure, Rachel. I never imagined it would go this far." "What do you mean?" Already fearing where this was headed, I asked Mom. She muttered almost as if it was too difficult for her to say, I have no idea what to do with her anymore. You were correct then, regarding the wedding and Felix specifically. But Rachel, it is not only that. I had been keeping things from her for so long, and I wasn't sure how to approach it. I pondered her comments silently for a moment. "What are you talking about, Kristen?" Then she stopped once more. She then spoke what I had been waiting for in a voice somewhat marked with shame. "I kept Mom and Felix under secretive from everyone. For years I withheld it from Jacob's family, from my in-laws. Simply said, if none knew, I reasoned it would be simpler. Still, I ought to have told them. I should have been straightforward. Along with a wave of frustration, I felt a surge of relief. Kristen, this goes beyond Felix or Mom's marriage. This covers everything, including how you have treated her over all these years and how you have made her feel as though she has to conceal. You cannot just toss something under the rug. I know, Christ said, sounding broken. I wanted not to deal with it. I wanted not to own the extent of my damage to her. I've been lying to myself, though, and right now it's all catching up with me. Closing my eyes, I tried to cool off. Though I wanted to say so much and was quite angry inside me, I had to keep in mind Kristen remained my sister. She was at last also owning her mistakes. Feeling my voice quiver a little. I don't know what to say, Kristen, I murmured. This goes beyond you as well. It relates to Mom. All of this has caused damage to her specifically, and given years of dishonesty to her, you have been asking me to support you. I can't keep doing that. I don't want you to support me, Rachel said fast. I'm not asking you to lie anymore, just, I am in need of aid. Though I have no idea how to solve this, I want to try. I also need you to be straight with me. I cannot keep acting as though everything is good when it is not. I have been residing in this. This illusion is destroying me. The revelation was long overdue, and for the first time in months, I felt Kristen was at last seeing things properly. However, I also felt resentful at the same time about the length of time it had taken her to arrive here. I had attempted to explain to her that Mom wasn't the issue. How often? I had attempted to show her the hurt she had caused several times. I, quote, am glad you're at last seeing the truth, I added, my voice lower now but still tinged with fury. You must nonetheless accept what you have done. Apologizing endlessly and believing everything will return to normal is not enough. Kristen, this will take time. I know, she said, sounding as though she could be crying again. Still, I would want to try. Rachel, I am not yet asking for pardon, but I have to straighten things up. Would you be able to help? I tried to figure out what I needed by inhaling deeply. This was not going to be simple. Actually, it was most likely among the toughest tasks I would have to perform. You've got a lot of work to do, Kristen, I replied lastly, but I'll help you. Maybe, just maybe, Kristen was ready to confront the truth, even if it meant facing the repercussions of her actions. I am not working for you here. Mom is depending on me for this, but you have to realize this won't be corrected overnight. I know, she said softly. I know. The conversation came to a sad close, yet I sensed some optimism flickering. Perhaps there was a means of healing this. Perhaps this was the start of something different, of Kristen at last seeing the weight of her actions, the damage she had done. But I also understood that things couldn't simply return to how they were. Reconciliation would not be easy and would call for more than just apologies and pledges. Real change would be required, and I wasn't sure if Kristen was ready for that. But for now, I had to believe this was a positive trend. Since Kristen's phone call a few weeks ago, I cannot claim things are any simpler. Our few more talks have been tense, like we are treading eggshells around one another. The true breakthrough occurred when Mom sat down with Kristen and eventually told her everything. Though at least I believe she is trying, every time I talk to her I wonder whether it is too little, too late. Months of pressing for this conversation had left me wondering how it would go, even though I wanted it to take place. At last, would Kristen realize the truth? Alternatively, would she stick to her values even more, always honoring Dad's memory? One evening when Kristen dropped by Mom's house, I had no idea what to anticipate. Though the discussion had been under development for some time, this was the moment of truth. Mom was seated at the kitchen table, hands tightly clasped in front of her, slightly crimson eyes. Naturally, I was there to make sure Kristen stayed out of denial. I had to leave them room, though, so they could talk. No matter how strongly I wanted to, I couldn't act fast. Mom began, her voice steady but somewhat emotional. Kristen, I know you have questions, she said. And I know you have been finding difficulty with what we have gone through, but you need to learn the truth immediately. The full truth. Kristen took a seat at the table with fidgety hands in her lap. She clearly showed turmoil in her eyes. She was afraid, I suppose, of what she would hear and how it may alter everything. She had been fixated for so long on the ideal family, of a dad who was simply misinterpreted. Mom started by discussing the early indicators of problems in her marriage to Dad, though, and that is not the fact. She talked about the mental and physical violence, the late-night arguments, and the lengthy stretches Dad would vanish for days. She shared with Kristen the hospital trips, the bruises she had covered, and the deep, long scars he had left on all of us, not just on her. Though I could see Kristen trying to understand it, her eyes flicked with uncertainty. She found it impossible to see our father capable of it. Ultimately, he was the man she had always idealized. And yet here she was, hearing things she never expected. I never wanted you to know all of this, Kristen, Mom said, her voice breaking for the first time. I wanted to guard you against the reality. I cannot, however, shield you from it anymore. I cannot let you continue to act as if everything was fine when it wasn't. Kristen said nothing for a long time. Your father was not the man you had assumed he was. She simply sat there, examining her hands as she considered what Mom had said. She was clearly under the weight of everything collapsing down on her. Her eyes began to fill with tears, but she hurriedly dabbed them away, attempting to keep herself together. I don't understand, Kristen said, her voice shaking. How could you accompany him? Why did you not go sooner? Mom let out a long sigh. Leaving is not always that easy, Kristen. Try many times. But it transcended me as well. I had Rachel and you to consider. I stayed thinking I was shielding you. I wanted you not to grow up in a dysfunctional house. I wanted you not to despise me for shattering the family. But I stayed much too long. I stayed for all the wrong reasons. Although I could see Kristen's thoughts working non-stop, her face remained fixed in that incredulous stare. She was not totally ready to hear this. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kristen spoke once again, trying to balance this new version of Dad with the one she had always carried in her heart. Her voice was low, hardly above a whisper. Why not let me know? Why did you wait to inform me? Mom paused. Kristen, I wanted you to carry no weight at all. Especially considering your young age, I wanted you not to view your father negatively. If I kept it secret, you would be good, I thought. But now I'm stuck in the middle, Kristen said, her voice cutting. I didn't want you to choose between us. I have no idea what to trust these days. Dad's been telling me something different while you have been preaching one thing. Finally, I spoke up, my voice piercing through the tension in the room. You've been listening to the wrong person, Kristen, I said. Dad is not the man you believe him to be. Kristen turned to me, her face twisted in uncertainty and rage. She had been lying to you, manipulating you, making you live in an imaginary world. Rachel, you don't understand. You have despised him constantly. You have always presented him as the villain. You have no idea what it is like to have him as a father. My heart dropped at her words, but I knew she was not looking at the whole picture. Kristen, this isn't about your anger. You only see that. It relates to what is actual. Actually, Dad has been poisonous for as long as I can remember. He gave us no thought at all. Kristen tightened her hands. He just thought of himself. She said, You're wrong, but I could see the holes in her facade. Mom gently reached out to grasp Kristen's hand and murmured, I know this is hard. I don't want to believe you. But even if you choose to reject it, the fact does not change. I do not want you to despise your father. It was quiet for a time. I'm asking you to know what happened and why it's not appropriate for him to be in our life anymore. Kristen's eyes seemed to be jumping between Mom and me, as though she was trying to sort out all we had just said. Her eyes widened with insight as much as with uncertainty. She objected to what we were telling her, and I understand. No one wants to face the fact that their entire life has been based on lies. At last, Kristen stood up, her face white. Her voice quivering, she said, I need time to think. I have to process all of this, Mom remarked gently. Take all the time you need. Still, keep from dragging it on too long. Keep from allowing the past to define you, Kristen. Kristen said nothing else except not let the acts of your father define you. She just left the room, leaving Mom and me alone with the weight of all we had just exposed. I looked to Mom, heart heavy. Do you suppose she might visit? I'm not sure, Rachel, Mom said quietly. But I cannot keep acting as though everything is fine. I felt a glimmer of optimism for the first time in a long time. The truth had to be told to her. Perhaps, just perhaps, Kristen would get it. Though it wouldn't be simple. Though there was no guarantee that things would ever go back to normal, as long as we kept speaking the truth and standing up for one another, maybe we could at last mend from the hurts Dad left behind. Time would be involved, but I was ready to wait. Months have gone by since that evening. I would have called you insane if you had told me then that things would become better between Kristen and me and among all of us. It felt like everything was falling apart back then, and I wasn't sure how we were going to rebuild from the ruins. That evening, Kristen departed Mom's house, and there was an unusual, heavy stillness between us. She needed distance. I understood, but I also knew she was dodging the truth. Right now, that is the toughest aspect. You want to run from the truth when it strikes you so forcefully. I can understand. I definitely do. The reality, nevertheless, has no regard for your desired degree of ignoring it. Simply said, things were strained between us for some time. Kristen stayed away, and I refrained from pressing. Though I wanted to give her time to process, really I had little hope she would show up. She was so enthralled in the illusion of Dad as this misinterpreted, sad character, and I could not understand how that picture could ever be reconciled with the monster Mom had detailed. I felt also enraged with her. After everything, how could she still yearn to hang on to that version of Dad? One thing, though, I had not taken into account: Kristen's own facing of the truth. It was not instantaneous. It happened not in one instant. It took time, but finally she came to me, her face drawn with tiredness, as if she had been bearing the weight of the earth on her shoulders. And in a sense, she had. Can we talk? I was surprised one day when Kristen inquired, her voice unsure, as though she was still looking for the proper words. After everything, I wouldn't have expected her to be inclined to conversation. She seemed to have severed relations with us, or at least with me. She was here, nevertheless, seeking a discussion. We settled in the living room, and she wasted no time. I've been considering carefully what Mom said about everything she told me, and Jacob and I have been discussing it as well. I suppose I objected to believing it. It didn't fit me to believe Dad could be capable of all that. But I simply stared at her, not sure what to say. I now think I understand. Though I knew it was not what she needed, part of me wanted to leap in and reassure her. Not mine. This was hers. I don't know how to even process it all, Kristen said, eyes downcast. For years, I have been so furious with Mom, but I never even paused to find out why she was acting the way she was, why she shoved me away from Felix, or why she never mentioned her marriage to him. But right now, I understand it. Dad was the reason this happened. It was because of all the crap he put her through. I was too blind to see it. I nodded, but I couldn't say anything yet. The proper moment seemed to be still a little way off. Kristen wasn't finished. I checked over the old pictures. Mom showed me the hospital paperwork, including divorce records. I have read all of it. Though I wanted not to believe it, how could I not? Rachel, I cannot pretend anymore. I find it impossible to keep defending him. For so long I have been lying to myself. Though I wasn't ready to confront the reality, now that I have, I feel as though all I knew about our family was a lie. I'm not sure how to react to that. For me, too, it was plenty. Though I knew what Dad was capable of, hearing Kristen say it aloud felt like the last cruel proof. Though it was a kick to the belly, it also brought relief. She was plainly seeing things at last. "I'm sorry, Kristen," she murmured, her voice breaking at last, waking from the haze Dad had so deftly created for all of us. "I was mistaken in all I said. With regard to you about Mom, I ought to have understood. I did not. I never paused to consider what was broken in the first place. I have been so self-serving, believing I could heal everything." "Kristen," I whispered gently, my voice almost audible above a whisper. "It's good. One is justified in being angry. One can be puzzled in good measure. Each of us has visited there. Now you realize the truth, which was exactly what I wanted. Okay, we can work through this together." She nodded, but tears smeared across her face. At last, she was releasing all the animosity she had been clinging to for so long. All the rage. That was, in a sense, the toughest component as well. One thing is to be honest. Another is embracing it. "Where do we proceed from here?" she questioned, eyes darting across mine, seeking responses. "With Mom, I'm not sure how to make things right. Not even sure how to solve things with you," I remarked, a gentle smile drawing at my lips. "There's no fixing it overnight, having screwed so much. But we go one day at a time. We start with our mutual honesty, and we begin by owning what happened, even if it hurts. If we are to move ahead, we have to let go of the past." Kristen inhaled deeply, as though she were at last releasing some of the weight she had been bearing. "I'm not expecting you to forgive me straight away," she murmured, wiping her eyes. "Still, I would want to try. I wish to put things right. I am here for Mom and for you." I stretched out and laid my hand on hers, wanting to be part of this family once more. "You are not required to complete it all at once. Yet I am here. Here we are. We will walk through this together," I promised. That was the first step. Things started to change gradually over the course of several months. Mom and Kristen spoke more, actually spoke, about everything. Kristen said she was sorry for the years she spent protecting Dad. Mom gracefully accepted the apology as she usually did. Still, it went beyond the apologies. It concerned the awareness that followed. I observed them from the sidelines, gently relieved that things were getting better. They began to repair their relationship not only as mother and daughter, but also as two women who had shared the same storm and had at last found common ground. Though there were scars that would not heal overnight, I still had questions. Yet, for the first time in a long time, I felt we were headed in the correct direction. Kristen had gone low contact with Dad, and it was the healthiest option she could have taken. The family I had lost, the family I had thought was damaged beyond repair, was beginning to put itself back together. She was free from the trap of trying to correct someone who refused to be corrected. She at last understood then that she could stop bearing the weight of the past. She was free to make decisions. Regarding me, I had discovered a fresh kind of calm. The quiet power that I had held for so long had begun to replace the rage I had harbored. At Kristen, I no longer felt wrath. Neither was my wrath directed at Mom. Just three ladies attempting to sort through the mess life had given us. It wasn't easy, but for once I believed we would be all right. Healing seldom is. Still, it turned out to be worthwhile.